previous videos, we looked at how publicity and advertising function as rhetorical systems. We focused on how messages are framed, how value and urgency are constructed, and how persuasion operates through language and imagery. In this third video, we're going to look at what happens after a message is released into the world. Even a well-crafted message does not exist on its own. It enters systems that shape who gets to see it, when they see it, and whether they respond at all. We've become a lot more attuned to this sort of limited audience and how things are distributed through social media, especially through paid reach, if you've worked in advertising, or the way that the influencer economy works, and the way that the algorithms that serve us the information, whether or not it's people that we know, businesses that we've consciously, actively sought out and focused on, or things that the algorithm thinks that we would like to see. It's decided what we get to see for a variety of reasons, and then that gives us the chance to be able to respond to something. And we can try and understand these systems so that when we are trying to get information out there, that can be done as effectively as possible. Understanding ad response is about understanding the systems and then setting realistic expectations for the impact of what you're putting out there. Advertising and publicity cost time, money, and labor. Because of that, organizations need ways to think about whether an effort is worth making. Is this the right place to put my message? Ad response is not about prediction with any sense of certainty. It's more so about planning and trying to set our expectations and see what our goals are and see if that's where it's worth putting our limited resources. By thinking carefully about audiences and the size, timing, and competition for their attention, you can estimate what an advertisement or publicity effort of some nature might reasonably achieve out there in the marketplace and trying to convince people to participate in what you're doing. This helps you to also avoid unrealistic expectations and supports more informed decision making. When you talk to somebody who's selling you advertising space, whether or not that's billboards or in print publications, on screens, etc., they're going to tell you about how many potential people could see it. This isn't necessarily the number of people who are actually going to see it. And even if they do see it, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to act upon it. So basing it off of the potential market size of a publication or an outlet is not necessarily effective until you start limiting it down to what your actual potential is based off of how you say your message and who you're targeting it for. One of the most common mistakes in advertising is to confuse reach with relevance. Reach refers to how many people could potentially see a message. And when you put together a targeted ad campaign on a social platform through their advertising tools, it's going to show you what may seem like a relatively high number for the amount of money that you might be willing to spend on that platform because they're talking about your potential reach. How many people is this going to be in front of? It doesn't necessarily translate into the number of people who are going to act, whatever taking action is in this situation. Targeting refers to how many of those people are actually in a position to respond. An advertisement seen by 1 million people may produce fewer results than one seen by a much smaller, well-defined audience. This is why in marketing, we often say that if you're advertising to everybody, then you are actually advertising to nobody. It's not targeted enough, you're just throwing things out there and saying it's for everybody. Then you're not thinking specifically enough about how to efficiently get your message out and get the actual people who are going to connect with what you're doing. If you tell a bunch of people in England about your event in London, Ontario, there are very few of them who are going to make it a priority to participate in your show. Whereas if you focus on Southern Ontario, especially around the London area, then there are more people who have more opportunities to participate in what you're doing. This is a simplified thought around what we mean by targeting. That is a geographic focus that is, who is this convenient to? This is similar to anecdotal ideas around the advertisement of Rolls-Royce as a luxury car brand. They found that showing up at car shows was not necessarily that effective for them to increase sales. The majority of people who are going to car shows and are looking at all cars sort of equally to compare them with each other are not necessarily looking at Rolls-Royce as the highest and most expensive end of the spectrum of what they might be looking at. That is a luxury good that is out of reach for many of the people attending there, when they're also looking at what is the newest thing done in economy and fuel efficiency. Instead, Rolls-Royce started advertising more to people who would go to plane shows, people who would be in the market for a private plane. Because more people who are in the market for a private jet or for personal transportation, who aren't flying a commercial carrier, first class or otherwise, but are flying in either their own or shared individual planes, are more likely to be spending money at a level at which they are going to buy something at the top level of luxury automobiles. Not to mention that they already are connected to a number of those people, because one of the other main products that Rolls-Royce creates is jet engines. So to think about ad response, it helps to break this process down into a few steps. First, you need to identify your target audience. Who is this message for? This could be limited by different types of factors: geography, their demographics, certain age ranges, certain communities. It could be done by psychographics, which is to say different types of interests or different types of activities that people participate in. Appealing to a university student is very different than a retiree who has more disposable income and might be going on vacations. If you were advertising for a trip package, you're going to advertise different trip packages to somebody who's looking at getting away during a reading week or otherwise a summer break, maybe backpacking, or looking at something that's where can I go to get away from university, versus someone who has a lot more time on their hands, a lot more flexibility, and disposable income now that they are towards the end of their career. Second, you need to estimate the size of the audience within a specific place or context. Even though you might have an idea of the type of person that you're trying to appeal to within your advertisement or your campaign, you're going to limit it to different outlets. Now, this could include online, which could have a lot more people globally looking at things, but oftentimes, because of the way that your business is set up or the way that your organization operates, especially if it's event-based, you're probably going to be looking at specific places in geography to limit your reach to, at least in terms of your priority. Third, you're going to want to consider timing. How often does someone realistically make the type of decision that you're asking about in this space? If you're talking about people going to see a show, whether or not that is a theater show or a music show or an exhibition at a gallery, how frequently are people going? Yes, you have people who are going to see things nearly every day. And if somebody is participating and you're advertising something in a festival, that sort of context of people who are participating in a festival may put you in a position where people are very consciously attempting to find things that they can do every day. But the average person is probably going to be looking at something most once a week if they don't have other responsibilities, they don't have family or caregiving expectations on them, and they have more free time on their hands, even though they are participating in their day-to-day life and existence where they are. So they might see something weekly, and then less frequently based off of other things that you might be competing with. The fourth thing to consider is the platform exposure. How many of these people are likely to encounter the message in that space? If you are advertising to people who are, let's say, middle-aged and you want to do online marketing, probably pretty good putting things on Facebook. Facebook's been around since 2004, so for more than a couple of decades, it's been a primary hub for people who engaged it perhaps earlier in their lives and continued to maintain social contacts there. They offer a lot of advertising, but you're going to get people who are participating in that platform. Whereas any of the subsequent social media sites, as they become more popular and more used and offered advertisement, such as Snapchat, TikTok, etc., moving forward, that those are going to come with different demographics of people who understand and participate in that platform. When we think about advertising overall, and you're thinking about things like print media, people who read print newspapers are a specific type of person. And they have a specific and set circulation. They print a certain number of copies of that publication. And that's not just for newspapers, which might seem a little bit archaic if you're not looking to get somebody of a certain age that's used to reading newspapers on a daily basis. If people are used to getting things online, you might insert those into other channels of communication that people regularly participate in which ad space becomes available. Fifth, and finally, you need to account for competition and the response rate for it. Not everyone who sees the message is going to act on it. Each of these steps narrows the group. It's not a failure, it's just how attention works, right? People have to be in the right place and time to receive your message and to act upon your message. By the time you reach the end of this process, the number of expected responses is often much, much smaller than the number of people initially assumed, or the number of potential people that you could get to if everybody saw it.
So the first thing that you look at is your target. Every product has a demographic that represents its prime target. Let's say, for example, that you want to target adults 25 to 54. So now that you know that this is your target of people that you want to get to, you need to define your market size. If you're located in a city of 1.5 million people and the 25 to 54 demographic represents 40%, then your target population is going to be 600,000 people. That's how many people you're trying to reach. And you have to then look at the duration between the purchases in the advertising that you're doing. Since people don't buy every product they use every day of the year, the duration between purchases is important to consider. How often do you want to see somebody make a buy? Now, if you're dealing with something like selling subscriptions, annual subscription specifically to a performing arts season, you're asking someone to do that once a year. So how often are they actually going to do it? Something once a year on average, that's 1/12 of the year in terms of month. They make the purchase in 1 month. So out of that 600,000 people, you're looking at about 50,000 people that you're looking at targeting in that sort of seasonal breakdown. Then if you're looking at a print publication, and in this case we're going to use a newspaper. So let's say your newspaper has 40% market penetration, which means that 40% of the potential buyers in your market read this newspaper on a regular basis, let's say on a daily basis, subscribers and individual buyers regardless. So if you've got 50,000 people that you're looking at the frequency of your buying, the duration between purchases is every year. So 1/12 of the year they're making it. So each month you're looking at 50,000 potential market reach. If you are putting it in, placing that out in a place that has 40% market penetration, then you're looking at 20,000 possible qualified exposures to your message. Now, not every subscriber reads every page every day. Studies show that if you get about 10% of the subscribers to read your ad, that's a very generous number. So applying that calculation to our example, reduce the number of targeted customers to about 2,000 that are actually going to see it. Then you have to look at your own market share. Unless you have an exclusive monopoly in your market, you have some competition with some customers who are loyal to other competitors. If your market share is 10%, then you can apply that to the remaining targeted customers, leaving about 200 as your reasonable expectation. You can assume about a 2% response rate from your ad. This is pretty normal for print. It can go down a lot for online marketing. So once you get through all of this, once you've established what size your market that you're in, the target demographic and how many people exist within that market that you're trying to get to, how often somebody's going to make a purchase, the circulation and the exposure to whatever platform that you're advertising on, how many people actually read it, what your actual market share versus your competitors are, and then your expected response rate. You can say that even though you're in a city of 1.5 million people, if 40% of the people in that population, in the demographic that you're targeting, read that paper, you're probably only going to see an expected response or customers making a transaction of 4 once you get down to the response rate. Now, if that ad buy is $100, and each of those tickets cost $30, then your return on investment is above your initial investment. You do see a return, you see a profit on that, so it may be worth it. Now, it may not be worth it when you calculate every part of design or the staff time that goes into making that ad and making the connection and doing the placements and coordinating with everybody.
It's important to understand that ad response calculations are based on assumptions. They're informed estimates, not promises. Different messages, designs, and contexts can shift outcomes, sometimes significantly, but no calculation eliminates uncertainty. If you have a mechanism, such as using a promotional code or having specific types of targeted links that track through specific platforms and specific types of action, you can compare people's activities insofar as you've been able to track them with your expected outcomes and confirm whether or not that was the right choice and that you feel that it's something that you'd like to repeat. Again, it's not always precise, it's not the most certain thing, but it will give you a level of confidence that this is where I can find my audience or find an audience that's willing to engage in what I'm doing. What these models do is provide a way to compare options, manage your resources, and make deliberate choices rather than just hopeful ones. Even within these constraints, rhetoric plays a critical role. A clearer message can improve response. A better defined audience can improve relevance. A stronger hook can increase engagement. Rhetorical choices do not guarantee success, but they influence how likely a message is to break through all the noise surrounding it. This is why the work that we did in the previous videos matters. In this module, you're not being asked to calculate ad response or create a full marketing package. Instead, you're being asked to understand how publicity operates rhetorically and structurally. When you write the opening paragraph of your press release, you're making decisions that affect not just clarity, but how a message might travel through real systems of attention. Taken together, these 3 videos provide a bit of a foundation for critically thinking about publicity before moving into visual design and production, which we're going to start getting into in the subsequent module. With that foundation in place, we're ready to move on from analysis into making.